Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Christine and I like to read dark and disturbing things. Today we are going to have my February reading wrap up. This is going to be what I read in the second half of February because I did already talk about my first half in another video, which I will link down below. I read 12 books altogether. I DNF'd 2, which is a goal of mine to DNF more often. The first 5 books that I read, I did already discuss. So go ahead and click on that video if you want to hear about those. Otherwise, we might be here all day. So first, let's talk about the 2 books I DNF'd. I DNF'd Bluebeard's Castle. I was about halfway through this book, and it wasn't so much that I hated it or anything like that. It's kind of a twofold reason. I could tell that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and at the same time my library loan ran out and I had to return it. So I was like, you know, this is kind of the perfect excuse to DNF a book that I don't, based on what everyone else was saying about it, I don't think I was really going to fully enjoy it. But the other one is I started to read Lake's Edge by Lyndall Clipstone. I've had this book on my shelf for a while. I was going for a gothic read. It's a very cool looking edition. And I think I got about 100 pages in, and I could just tell it was reading very YA to me. And I mean, not in a good way. And I could just tell that it was going to be a mediocre at best book. I think the old me would have just pushed through and finished it. But I was just like, why put yourself through this? You know you're not going to love this book. Just let it go. And I did. All right, on to what I did read. I don't own this book, but it is Bittersweet Chocolate by C.M. Gudros. Sorry if I am saying that incorrectly. This was on KU, and I read this for Valentine's Day. I thought it would be a very fun, non-traditional Valentine's Day read. This is a splatterpunk horror book or extreme horror book, and it is about a woman who is married and her husband is not the greatest guy, and she decides to, despite being treated like crap, she is still going to surprise him at work with something nice. And it turns out that she finds out even more about him that she didn't want to know when she shows up at his work. So she gets a little revenge. This is very much a revenge story, a good for her story that takes place in her she shed, and it makes me finally understand the allure of having a she shed, especially one that's soundproof. It's only 54 pages, so it's a short one, and it was a fun time. I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is a book that I've had on my shelf for a while, and that is Jawbone by Monica Ojeda. And this was, this is a weird book. I was not really sure what to expect. I have heard mixed reviews. I think this is a book that you either get or you don't. And for me, I wouldn't say I fully understood it. I would be lying if I said I fully understood it, but I still was in it. I still was having a good time. So this is about some high school girls who are friends. We start off with one of those girls that we see has been kidnapped by their teacher and is being held hostage in like a cabin in the woods somewhere. And we kind of go back and forth between the girl's point of view and this teacher's point of view and how we got to this point. This book isn't so much about the plot as it is kind of like a piece of art that is in written form. It has just a lot of commentary on the relationships between women, whether it be friendships and how complicated those friendships can be, especially when we are teenagers. Our relationships with our own mothers that are also can be very complicated. There is a lot of like flowery writing in here and a lot of just one-sided conversations, I would say. So it kind of like flips in and out between one of the girls talking to a therapist, but we only ever hear one side of the conversation. So it is very much like a stream of consciousness type thing. I feel like I'm explaining this really poorly, and that is because this is just a very difficult book to to explain and to understand. So I think that's why it has like such a divided audience, as far as people that that are reviewing this. But I still had a good time, even though I don't think I was there 100% of the way. And I should mention that I did listen to this, which I'm not sure if that's a good thing or bad thing, but if you look at the pages, it's just like wall of text, which I think would be very difficult to read, and it's just like constant. I think that would be very difficult to read without having like the breaks in there. So I can see why people aren't really into it, but it is all very much like the style of this storytelling, I think. So I don't know how to explain it, but I still give it a 4 out of 5. I really had a good time, and I think I would read this one again, trying to get a little bit better of a grasp of what is being said here. I'm not sure what I did with my copy right now, so I'll put a picture up here, but I also read Rootwork by Tracy Cross. This is a book about 3 sisters who are going off to their auntie's house to spend some time and get to know her. And this aunt dabbles in hoodoo, and one of the daughters is really excited to learn a lot about this. But it turns out that the youngest sister is the one that really takes to it and finds that she has kind of these special abilities. I feel like most of the story isn't actually about that. It's more about the family dynamic, and probably the part that I liked the best about this book was you instantly felt like you were part of this family. Just seeing the different sisters, their dynamics with one another, and just how they interacted. I felt like it was very real. They are struggling with a lot of racism in their town, and with, in particular, the sheriff that is in charge, and the death of a family member. So there's kind of a lot going on in this short book. I think I was really into it at first. I thought that the author did a really good job of drawing me in and getting to know the personalities of these girls. But as the story went on, I was kind of like, where are we going? Where are we going with this? There's kind of a heavy thing that happens maybe about 60% of the way through the book that I feel like was not fully talked about, that needed to be. Like, it was a very heavy thing that happened that these girls were involved in, and it made me feel uncomfortable, and I know that it made some of them feel uncomfortable, but instead of ever really talking about it, it's just kind of like that just happened and we move on. So I just feel like it didn't, the gravity of that situation should have had a lot more said about it than it did. And the story just kind of meanders on, and I didn't know where it was going. It is part 1 of a series, apparently, so maybe we get some of these things explained as we go on, but I think it fell flat for me, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 star. Next up, I read A Short Stay in Hell, I believe, hopefully I get this name right, by Stephen Peck. And this is another short story and a short stay in hell that is definitely worth your time to read. This is about following a man who finds out that he has died and he did not make it to heaven. As it turns out, unless you are a particular religion, which is like this really obscure, I'm not even sure if it's a real religion, to be honest with you, then you just end up in hell. And hell is a little bit different than what we all imagine it to be. So hell is different for everybody that ends up there, which is almost everybody. And our character is told, well, you know, you really liked to read when you were alive, and you weren't a bad person. So what we're going to do is we're going to make your version of hell where you are in this huge library where every book that has ever been written exists, but also every book that could possibly be written exists. And it's like every combination of spaces or random letters will be in these books. So it's not just like going to a huge bookstore. It is books of just gibberish as far as the eye can see. And he's told that, you know, you can still make your way out of hell and go to heaven, but you just have to find the book that tells your life story from start to finish with no misspellings, with nothing left out. You find that book, give it to us, and no problem, we'll put you in heaven. So a lot of things go on in this short book, but what it really got my mind boggled was just the sheer numbers of the near infinity of combinations there can be of letters and spaces, and never being able to really find anything close to what you're looking for during this time, and just how long infinity really is. It's easy to say, oh yeah, forever, but when you think about forever and how monotonous that would be, yeah. I don't want to say too much because this is a short story, but it is definitely worth a read. Maybe check out your library and see if they have it. That's where I got my copy, but it was a good one. I had a good time. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read the first book in a series that I've had for a while called Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. I ended up with this series during some kind of sale where they had this set of 4 books, and it was a pretty good deal. And each one seems to be about something that I thought would be really cool sounding. So there's like Stalking Jack the Ripper, there's one about Dracula, there's one about Houdini, there's one about the devil, and I was like, these sound fun. And then they sat on my shelf forever. So I am working through the books that I own, and I picked this one up. And I did a buddy read with a couple of other people. This book is about a highborn lady who has no interest in fulfilling like her womanly duties of just being quiet and learning how to sew and getting married for power gains and having a family. She is more interested in learning, and she's interested in science in particular, and possibly becoming a surgeon. She has this uncle who does all kinds of experiments, and she is able to kind of hang out in his basement and learn how to just learn about the human body through cadavers. The beginning of this book reminded me very much of Anatomy, a Love Story, which has a very similar start, but somewhere halfway through this kind of turned a little bit more into a mystery, as a lot of young women are showing up dead thanks to Jack the Ripper, and she is trying to find clues to find this person. It kind of turns into more of like a Sherlock Holmes Watson thing. She has a partner in crime here where he is Sherlock and she is Watson, and it kind of has more of that dynamic, but with a little bit more flirting. There were things I really liked about this book, but then there were things that I really did not love. It did get better about the halfway point for me when we kind of turned away from constantly reminding us that she was a woman and doing things that a woman should not be doing. It was like, okay, we get it. We understand. You don't need to keep reminding us that this is a very unheard of for a woman. We know. Our character is also a little bit annoying in that she is always saying that she doesn't want guys telling her what to do, even when they aren't telling her what to do. Sometimes they're just being helpful or just being nice, and she's just like, I don't need your help. I could do it myself. And it's like, yeah, you could, but maybe you could also just let someone be nice to you. So I found that a little bit frustrating. It did get a little more interesting when more danger was involved, and we got to see the little bit of back and forth of like the Sherlock Watson type thing. And then the ending, I think, was supposed to be a bit of a surprise, but I had by then figured it out. So I don't know, it read pretty YA to me. The characters weren't super immature, but there just wasn't a whole lot of depth to the characters, and that makes me kind of sad because I do still kind of want to read the other books, but I'm really hoping that they step it up. Like if I read a second book and it doesn't step it up, I'm going to have to DNF the series. But I think when I finished this, I was like, I think I gave it a 3.5, but I think it's probably closer to a 3 out of 5 star. Next up, I listened to The Center by Aisha Manazir Siddiqui, and this is a book about a Pakistani woman living in London who is a translator. She's mostly translating like Bollywood type movies and giving them subtitles, but she really would aspire to do more with translation work. She would like to read great works of art in other languages and translate them and have a career there. She's in some class when she meets this other guy who speaks many different languages very fluently in perfect accent. And they start hanging out and become romantically involved. And we eventually learn that he has this unique way of learning these languages, and that is going to this top secret center where you go there for 10 days, completely cut off from the outside world. No talking while you're there. You eat what they tell you to eat. You go, like, you follow their schedule the way they tell you to do it. You can't check your phone. There's no email, no television, nothing. You are there for 10 days, and at the end of the 10 days, you will be fluent in whatever language you chose. So there's a lot of rules, and it's very secretive. Like, you can only go to this center by invite, and each person can only invite one person. So he invites her, and she goes there, and she learns another language. This book is pretty bizarre, in the best way. Not only do we know that something really weird has to be going on in the center because it's so hush hush, but there's a lot of commentary throughout this story. Even at the beginning, when we're learning about her boyfriend and their relationship, there's just a lot of commentary about race and feminism, and I was there for it all. I felt like I could just listen to this character talk and not even be involved in any kind of plot. I was just there for all of her commentary on her life and growing up, and I had a good time just listening to her. I think that is what's going to make or break this one for most people, is if you are there and you want 100% answers at the end of this book, you want to know exactly what happened, you are probably not going to be too happy with this book. It does leave some things just kind of open to interpretation, but for me, even though I was really interested in the center and all the weirdness that was going on with it, I just really liked the author's writing and her commentary on life. It's almost like the center was kind of secondary to all the things that were going on in her life. So it just depends on what kind of reader you are, but I really had a good time with this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Last but not least, I read a NetGalley arc of The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This one is described as a feminist psychological horror about the making of a female serial killer from a Korean American perspective. I am all for unhinged women right now. I cannot get enough. I think that there's something to say about how much more we're starting to see unhinged women in books and how drawn we are to that. It's almost like we all might snap at any moment. This one is a relatively short book, coming in at 288 pages. It is about a Korean American girl, young adult. I think she's just like a freshman in college, and her life with her sister and her mom. And we start off this book where everybody's kind of abandoning her in her life. Her friends have all gone off to college. They've gone to another college that she didn't get into. She's the only one out in that situation. And her father recently left her mother and the family to be with another woman and start a family with that woman. So we have a lot of loss going on, and our main character is kind of left to pick up the pieces. Her mom is just in shambles, she basically has to be a mother figure to her sister and to her mother because her mother's pretty much useless at this point. She has given everything she has to be with this man, and she feels like she's nothing without him. It doesn't take too long before her mom finds another man to be with, and he is a white man named George, and he's a piece of work. He is basically this racist, total stepdad material, in my experience. He is just this gross white man who fetishizes Asian women and pretty much just inserts himself into their lives, and all of a sudden is living in their apartment. Both the sisters can see how disgusting this guy is, but the mother is completely smitten with him because now she has another chance at life. So she feels, because she feels she is nothing without men. This guy has very blue eyes, and it kind of sets off this chain reaction within our main character who all of a sudden desires to know what it would taste like to have his eyeball in her mouth. Normal stuff. It basically triggers this downward spiral of violence and revenge, and it's a good time. This one again has a lot of commentary throughout about how in particular Asian women are treated, and it was quite eye-opening, pun intended. I really enjoyed watching her descent into madness, and the ending was, I loved it. I think this one comes out maybe in June, and I highly recommend picking it up, especially, I keep hearing it compared to Mayfly, though I don't. While we do have eyeballs involved in Unhinged Women, Mayfly, I feel like that character, her whole thing was that she did not have like this crazy background that caused her to be this way. Whereas in this one, I feel like our main character did have reason and abandonment issues and things that kind of pushed her over the edge. So one is more revenge, which is this book, and Mayfly is just watching people be unhinged for just the sake of being unhinged for no good reason. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. So what was my favorite book of the month? That is a good question. I think the book I rated the highest was Strange the Dreamer, which I covered in the last video. I did really love the center, and the eyes are the best part. Jawbone was also pretty good. I think overall it was just a solid reading month. I think if I have to pick a book, I think it's between The Eyes Are the Best Part and Strange the Dreamer. Only because I think The Eyes Are the Best Part is going to kind of live on with me for quite some time. So let me know down below, have you read any of these books, or do you plan on reading any of them? If you've made it this far in the video and you don't have much to say, that's fine. Leave me an eyeball emoji down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay spooky.